"Get out of here, you old trespasser." That's the first thing I heard as I stepped across the threshold of the mountain house I had owned for 43 years. Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the cold afternoon air, and for one small second, I wondered if she actually believed those words. If she truly thought she had the authority to throw me out of my own home. I stood perfectly still, my hands still resting on the doorknob, and forced myself to breathe in slowly. The pine scent drifting through the cracked window steadied me more than her shouting ever could. Before you watch another second, take a breath, because this story will hit close to home. If you've ever been betrayed by the very people you trusted, this one is for you. Stay with me, you won't believe how it ends. Instead of reacting, instead of letting her win by raising my voice, I simply closed the door behind me. The soft click sounded louder than her yelling, and I saw the smallest flicker of uncertainty cross her face. Good. She wasn't expecting calmness. She wasn't expecting me to stand tall in my winter coat, loosen the scarf around my neck, and walk inside like I belonged there, because I did. I set my purse gently on the entry table, the same table my late husband built. My fingers brushed its edge, and for a moment the familiar texture reminded me who I was, who I had always been. The woman who kept this house standing through storms, repairs, and long winters. My daughter-in-law stood across the room with her arms folded, tapping her foot like I was inconveniencing her. The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Nearly. I said, "Leave," she repeated louder this time. Her parents, seated on my sofa as if it were their vacation rental, looked at me with a strange mixture of annoyance and fear. Her mother clutched a throw blanket from my linen closet, and her father had a newspaper, my newspaper, folded neatly on the armrest. They were too comfortable. Much too comfortable. Instead of leaving, I walked farther into the living room. My boots pressed faint marks into the old wood floor, still damp from the melting snow outside. The clock above the fireplace ticked loudly as if marking each second of the disrespect unfolding in front of me. I took in every detail. Their mugs on my coffee table, the half-finished puzzle spread across the dining table, a grocery list taped to my refrigerator with my name not included but hers written in bold marker. A strange chill worked its way down my spine. "Did you all move in here?" I asked softly, not sarcastic, not confrontational, simply curious. But she heard the edge beneath my voice. "He always did." She straightened her shoulders. "We've been staying here for a while. And since you weren't using it, we figured it was best to make it ours for now." "Ours. For now." Words she tossed casually, as if claiming another person's home was as simple as claiming an empty parking spot. I lowered myself into the armchair across from her parents, and they shifted uneasily, unsure if they should greet me, apologize, or simply disappear. I didn't give them time to choose. I rested both hands on the arms of the chair and looked straight at my daughter-in-law. "You're calm today," she said slowly, narrowing her eyes. "Too calm." She wasn't wrong. I was calm. Far calmer than anyone in her position would expect. Because unlike her, I didn't need to shout or throw accusations. I already knew something she didn't know, that hidden thing she had no idea I carried with me. The weight of it sat quietly in my purse near the entry table. I didn't touch it. Not yet. But just the knowledge of its presence gave me the steadiness she mistook for surrender. "I just came to rest a while," I said, adjusting the blanket over the back of my chair, reclaiming my space inch by inch. "It's been a long week." Her mother coughed lightly, a nervous sound. Her father refused to meet my eyes. Even the puzzle pieces on the table looked displaced, as if they sensed they didn't belong to the hands that had been touching them. A gust of cold air blew through the cracked window, making the curtains sway gently. It was the kind of mountain breeze that usually comforted me, but now it carried a faint unease, something like the warning before a storm. "You can't stay here," she insisted, stepping forward. "We're using this house now." "And I'm here," I replied. "But you weren't invited," her father muttered under his breath, so quietly I almost pretended not to hear. But I heard. And his words landed somewhere deep where old wounds lived. I felt that familiar ache rise. The ache of being pushed aside, minimized, treated like I had no place in my own life. But I swallowed it down. This moment wasn't about emotion. Not yet. I had something far more powerful than anger on my side. "What exactly makes you think you can decide who stays in this house?" I asked. She lifted her chin, confidence dripping from her voice. "Because your son said we could use it. And because we plan to take care of it now." "Take care of it?" The house that had survived decades of storms without her help. The house she never visited until she learned it was valuable. It's been neglected for years, she added. We're doing you a favor. A favor. That word settled in the room like dust, irritating, unwanted, impossible to ignore. I leaned back in the chair and breathed in slowly, letting the crackling fire warm my legs as I gathered my thoughts. I see, I murmured. She expected me to argue. She expected a scene, tears maybe or raised voices. Instead, I studied her quietly, the way one studies a stranger sitting too comfortably in a seat they didn't earn. Her overconfidence wasn't just bold, it was sloppy. And sloppy people always left clues behind. My eyes drifted around the room again. There were things out of place. A key on the side table that didn't belong to me, a receipt sticking out of her father's jacket pocket for items I knew weren't purchased in this town, and a faint stain on the rug that hadn't been there last month. They'd been here longer than she implied. Maybe much longer. How long have you all been staying here? I asked gently. Her eyes narrowed again. Why does that matter? Because, I said, folding my hands, if you've lived here more than a week, then you've had plenty of time to go through my things. Her mother looked down at her lap quickly. Too quickly. What are you implying? My daughter-in-law demanded. Nothing yet, I answered. But she heard what I didn't say. He always did. I could see the flicker of fear in her expression. Not enough to show weakness, but enough to show she wasn't as secure as she pretended. She shifted her stance, planting her weight differently like someone ready to stand her ground. But this wasn't about ground. This was about ownership. And ownership wasn't measured in footsteps on a floor. It was measured in signatures on a deed. Leave now, she said again, but softer this time, less sure. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my coat, and walked past her. Her shoulders stiffened as I reached the entry table. I opened my purse, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the deliberate calm of someone who knows time is on her side. I didn't pull out the folder. I didn't need to. Not yet. Just knowing it was there, untouched and waiting, gave me all the strength I needed. I turned back to her, meeting her eyes with the steadiness of a woman who had weathered far worse storms than an entitled daughter-in-law. If you're so confident this house is yours, I said quietly, then call the sheriff. Her mouth fell open slightly. Her parents froze. Even the fire seemed to soften its crackling as if waiting for her response. For the first time since I walked in, she didn't have a comeback. And I didn't need one either. Not yet. This was only the beginning. That thought lingered in my mind as I stood by the entry table, my fingers brushing the soft leather of my purse. My daughter-in-law watched me closely, her eyes narrowing as if she could sense something shifting, something slipping out of her control. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I drew in a slow breath, letting the warmth of the fire meet the cool air drifting in from the cracked window. My heart beat steadily, too steadily for a woman being told to leave her own home. And that bothered her more than any argument could have. She took a step closer. What are you doing? Her tone sharpened, but beneath it, a small quiver of uncertainty hid, a crack in the mask she always wore so confidently. I'm simply getting comfortable, I replied, pulling out the thick folder I had tucked inside my purse. The weight of it felt heavier than usual, almost symbolic. I didn't open it right away. I just held it in my hands, letting the silence stretch long enough for her parents to shift uncomfortably on the sofa, their eyes darting between me and their daughter. Her father spoke first, clearing his throat. What's in that? His voice didn't carry authority, only concern, maybe even fear. Something I should have looked at sooner, I said. Her mother clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She wasn't a cruel woman, not the way her daughter could be. But she was complicit, and complicity always comes with its own guilt. I didn't address them yet. My focus stayed on the woman who had tried so hard to erase me. My daughter-in-law let out a scoff. Oh please. Don't try to act mysterious. Whatever you're carrying won't change anything. But the way she said it, the way her eyes locked onto the folder, told me she feared exactly that. I walked past her, taking my time, and placed the folder gently on the dining table beside the half-finished puzzle. A piece lay on the edge, slightly bent. I pressed it flat with my fingertip before taking a seat. She followed me like a shadow, hovering, restless, irritated that I had taken control of the room without lifting my voice. Sit, I said quietly. Her brows shot up. She wasn't used to being instructed, not by me. But something in my tone must have struck a chord, because she obeyed even if reluctantly, planting herself across from me with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This better not turn into one of your guilt trips," she muttered. "We're not doing that today." "We're not doing guilt," I said. "We're doing clarity." Her parents exchanged another uneasy glance. I opened the folder. The first page was a copy of a bank statement. I didn't slide it toward her yet. Instead, I placed the folder flat and really looked at her for the first time since stepping through the door. She looked tired beneath her perfectly drawn eyeliner, and I wondered, not for the first time, whether she spent more energy pretending to be strong than actually being strong. "I've been keeping records," I said. "A full year's worth." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I continued before she regained the confidence to interrupt. "Bills with unusual charges. Loan inquiries. Withdrawals that didn't match my son's spending habits. Conversations you didn't know I overheard." I tapped the folder. "It's all here." Her father leaned forward slightly, then froze as if afraid even his curiosity might incriminate him. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" she asked, her voice trembling now, the facade beginning to crack. "I'm not accusing you," I answered. "I'm showing you what you've already done." And then I slid the first page toward her. She snatched it, skimmed it, and let out a shaky breath. "This proves nothing. These are just numbers." "Numbers that come from accounts you accessed," I replied. She opened her mouth to deny it, but her mother placed a gentle hand on her wrist. A small gesture. A meaningful one. One that told me her mother knew, maybe not everything but enough. I turned to the next set of documents. This time I placed them directly in front of her parents. "These," I said, "are loan forms submitted with my son's name on them. But his signature doesn't match his real one." Her father's face lost its color. Her mother pulled the blanket tighter still, as if she could hide behind its knitted threads. "He agreed to those," my daughter-in-law snapped. "No," I said softly. "He didn't." Her jaw clenched. "He told me he did." "He told you," I replied, "because you pushed him into believing whatever you said must be true." I watched her chest rise and fall rapidly. Anger, fear, confusion, it all swirled together in her expression. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the wood floor. The sound made her parents flinch. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're twisting things. You always twist things." "Sit down," I said again, though this time more firmly. She hesitated. Only for a moment. But that moment was enough to shift the balance of power in the room. She sat, slower than before. I pulled out another sheet, this one more sensitive. A transcript. Words printed in simple black ink, no embellishment, no interpretation. Just her voice captured in text. Her mother reached for it first, tentative, her fingers trembling. She read the first few lines, then looked up at her daughter with disbelief so sharp it cut the air between them. "My goodness, you said this?" she whispered. My daughter-in-law snatched the page, read it, and for the first time since I arrived, real fear flickered in her eyes. "That's taken out of context," she sputtered. "I didn't mean it that way." "You said," I reminded her gently, "once she's out of the way, the mountain house will finally be ours." Her father stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. How could you say that?" "I was venting," she shouted. "People vent. People don't forge signatures," I replied. Silence fell like snow, soft but heavy. "So that's what this is," she demanded. "You came here to attack me?" "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I came here to rest. But you turned my home into a battleground long before I walked through that door." She opened her mouth, closed it, then forced out a shaky laugh. "You think you're so clever. But none of this will matter. My husband believes me. He always has." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said the one sentence that drained every drop of color from her face. "Does he?" Her breath caught. What does that mean?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I pulled out one final item from the folder. Not a document. Not a transcript. A small voice recorder. Silver. Simple. Her father's hands gripped the edge of the table. Her mother whispered a quiet prayer under her breath. "I've been keeping more than papers," I said softly. Her chair creaked as she leaned back slowly, her confidence finally collapsing under the weight of the truth she sensed but couldn't yet see clearly. "You don't want to hear what's on this," I added. She swallowed hard. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The fire crackled behind us. The mountain breeze pressed against the window. Her parents stared at her with stunned disappointment. And I sat there, calm as ever, with the folder open between us. Its contents no longer just paper, but pathways to consequences she had never imagined. Before she could form another denial, another excuse, another lie, someone knocked on the door. A firm knock. Familiar. Her eyes widened. And I smiled quietly to myself. Because she finally understood. This was no bluff. And the beginning was already behind us. The knock at the door echoed through the room before any of us could react. It wasn't a timid tap or the hurried pounding of a neighbor. It was steady, firm, and familiar. So familiar that my daughter-in-law's face tightened instantly. She turned toward the door with a stiffness that betrayed more fear than she intended to show. Her parents didn't move. They sat rooted in place as if the knock had turned them to stone. I stayed seated, my hands resting gently on the open folder before me. I didn't need to see who stood outside. I already knew. There was a certain rhythm to that knock. Patient, controlled, yet carrying a weight that settled over the room like dust. My breath steadied even as my heart pushed a little harder against my ribs. Not from fear. From relief. And maybe, if I admitted it, a touch of sorrow for what my son was about to walk into. She was the first to speak. "Don't open it," she whispered harshly to no one in particular, though her eyes darted to her father as if he might rise and block the door for her. He didn't. He only swallowed hard and shook his head. Another knock. Louder this time. My daughter-in-law stepped forward but froze halfway. Maybe she expected me to take over, to answer, to intercept whatever truth hovered on the other side. But I didn't move. Instead, I watched her, every small twitch of her fingers, every uneven breath, every anxious glance at the folder. She thought she still had time to recover her footing. She thought she could spin her story, fix her narrative. She didn't know the clock had already run out. The door opened slowly. My son stepped inside. He didn't storm in. He didn't call her name. He didn't even look at me first. He walked into the room with his coat still on, bits of snow clinging to the sleeves, and let the door shut behind him with a soft thud that seemed to pull the air tighter around all of us. He scanned the room, his wife near the dining table, her parents stiff on the sofa, me seated calmly with the folder open. His gaze lingered on the documents for only a second before he looked at his wife. Really looked at her. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. His voice was steady, too steady for her liking. She rushed toward him, grabbing his arm before he could fully step into the room. "Baby, listen," she said quickly, her words tumbling out. "She's trying to start something. She came in here making accusations, trying to twist everything again." He gently removed her hand from his sleeve. "Just tell me what's happening." She opened her mouth again, but he walked past her. He placed his gloves on the side table and approached me with a slow, almost hesitant step. I felt a familiar ache swell in my chest, the kind a mother feels when her child is caught between loyalty and truth. He rested one hand on the back of the chair beside me, supporting himself as if he sensed something heavy waiting beneath the surface. "What is this?" he asked, his voice softer than before. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I slid one document toward him, the same one his wife had skimmed earlier. He didn't snatch it or glance over it hurriedly. He lifted it carefully and read every line, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. Behind him, she started pacing. "She's exaggerating," she said. "She always does this when she feels threatened. She wants to turn you against me. She has never liked me from the beginning." "Stop," he said quietly. The word fell like a stone. She froze mid-step. He looked at the second document, then the third, then the transcript. His jaw tightened. The fire crackled louder, filling the silence she was too afraid to break. Finally he spoke again. But he didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the page. "Did you say this?" he asked, his voice low but steady. She rushed to his side. "It was taken out of context. I was upset. I was venting. I didn't mean anything by it." He folded the transcript slowly and placed it on the table. Then he turned to her mother. "Did you know about this?" Her mother flinched. We thought she was just talking. We didn't think she would actually. Her father cut in. We didn't know anything about the loans. Loans? My son repeated sharply. His wife grabbed his arm again. Don't look at me like that. You know how stressful things have been. I needed help. I thought you would understand. You forged my name, he said. Her mouth fell open. No, I just helped organize things. It wasn't. He stepped back, putting distance between them for the first time. You lied to me. I watched him carefully, noting the slight tremor in his fingers, the way his shoulders sank as if bearing a weight he hadn't prepared for. A part of me longed to reach out to comfort him the way I did when he was small. But this moment wasn't mine to guide. It was his to face. Why didn't you tell me you were staying here? He asked her, his voice now tinged with disbelief. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly small. We thought it would be temporary. And you weren't using it, so I figured. You figured you could just move in? He interrupted. She glared at me then, desperate for someone to blame. She doesn't even come here anymore. She leaves it empty for years. We were taking care of it. This is my childhood home, he said firmly. You don't decide what happens here. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. He heard it. And it terrified her. She tried again. I was protecting us. You said we needed space. You said you were exhausted. I didn't say take my mother's house, he snapped. Her parents sat silently, their expressions tight with shame. He turned to me next. His face softened, but only a little. Mom, why didn't you tell me earlier? I swallowed. Because I wasn't sure you would hear me. He blinked, the meaning sinking in. A long silence settled between us, not hostile, not cold, but heavy with unspoken truth. He pulled out the chair beside me and sat down slowly, running a hand over his face as if trying to piece together months of half-truths. His wife moved toward him again. You're letting her manipulate you. She planned this. She wants to make me look bad. Enough, he said quietly. She froze. You need to stop talking and listen. Her lips parted in disbelief. She wasn't used to this version of him. He looked at the documents again, then at her. Did you forge my name on these loans? She glanced at her parents, then at me, then back at him. I didn't think it would matter. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. He leaned back slowly as if the words had physically pushed him. He stared at her without speaking, and in that silence, something profound shifted. The kind of shift a marriage doesn't easily survive. She tried once more. I only did it because I love you. He shook his head. No. You did it because you thought you were smarter than everyone else. Her face crumpled. Don't say that. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the voice recorder I had placed quietly near the edge of the folder. He reached for it, examining it with careful fingers. You recorded her? He asked. No, I said softly. She recorded herself. I just saved it. His eyes widened slightly. Play it. I hesitated. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because I could see the edges of him wearing thin. This would cut deeper than the papers ever could. But he needed the truth, not just pieces of it. All of it. I pressed the small button. Her voice filled the room. Confident. Careless. Talking about getting me out of the way. Talking about taking the house. Talking about starting over without the old woman. She lunged toward the recorder. Turn it off. That was private. He didn't let her touch it. You meant every word. Her parents bowed their heads. She looked around the room, desperate, cornered. You can't trust that recording. But he was already standing. And when he looked at her, he didn't see a partner. He saw the truth. Her knees buckled. And for the first time in years, I saw my son clearly. Not the man shaped by her influence, but the one I raised. He stood there, breath unsteady, eyes fixed on his wife as though a fog had finally cleared from his mind. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing every layer of disbelief and hurt settling into his expression. His wife looked back at him with trembling lips, trying to read him, trying to grasp any sign that she still held power over him. But the silence between them felt different now, heavier, sharper, filled with truths she could no longer avoid. She took a step toward him. You don't understand, she whispered. You're overwhelmed. You're misinterpreting all this. But he didn't move. He only shifted his gaze briefly toward her parents, who sat frozen on the sofa, suddenly aware that their daughter's world was slipping through her fingers. I drew a slow breath, feeling the weight of years pressing gently against my ribs. There was no triumph in this moment, just a quiet ache like watching a long, painful knot finally loosen. My son placed the recorder on the table and pulled out a chair, lowering himself into it as though his legs couldn't hold him any longer. "Say something," she pleaded. "I'm thinking," he replied softly. His voice, steady, calm, heartbreakingly quiet, cut deeper than any shout could have. She wrapped her arms around herself, stepping back as though bracing against a sudden cold wind, though the room was warm. Her father finally cleared his throat. "Son, maybe you should take some time to process before making any decisions." But my son shook his head. "Time isn't the issue. Truth is." I felt the sting behind my eyes at those words. Not tears of sadness, but the quiet pain of watching him confront something he should never have had to face. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, then looked at his wife again. "Why did you come here without telling me?" She hesitated, glancing at her mother for support she no longer had. "We needed space. And you said you needed time to think." "Time to think," he repeated. "Not for you to pack up your parents and move into my mother's home." She opened her mouth but found no defense strong enough for this moment. The fire crackled again, louder this time, as if punctuating his words. I watched my son's hands, steady but tense, his fingers curled slightly against the table edge. He didn't look at the folder again, he didn't need to. He had all the clarity he required. She tried another tactic, softening her tone, stepping closer as if recalling an old script. "Honey, I made mistakes. I admit that. But everything I did was for us. For our future. For our stability." He looked at her with an exhaustion I recognized too well. The same exhaustion that comes from carrying someone else's chaos for too long. "You forged my name," he said. "You lied about money. You hid things from me. That isn't stability." Her face crumpled. "You don't understand what it's like to feel like everything depends on you. I needed control. I needed to feel secure. My son lifted his hand, signaling her to stop. His voice softened. "You needed power. That's not the same as security." Her parents shifted uncomfortably, the shame in the room settling over them like a heavy blanket. I wasn't sure whether to speak or stay silent. My heart ached for my son, but this confrontation was his. His truth to face, his wound to expose. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "We were taking care of things. The house needed upkeep. Your mother never comes here, she doesn't even." "That doesn't give you the right to take it," he said. Her knees buckled slightly, but she stayed standing, gripping the edge of the table. "Please," she begged. Don't do this." My son rose slowly, his height making her shrink back instinctively. He walked toward the fireplace, staring into the flames as though searching for words he hadn't used in years. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, resolute. "Mom," he said, turning toward me, "do you want them to leave tonight?" My daughter-in-law gasped, taking a step back, her hand flying to her chest. I think it would be best," I replied gently, though my voice wavered with a mixture of sorrow and certainty. "For everyone." Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't the tears of someone wronged. They were the tears of someone who realized their hold had shattered. "You can't kick us out like this," she whispered, her voice cracking. My son looked at her calmly. "This isn't your home." Her parents finally stood, slowly, like people rising from a long, uncomfortable dream. Her mother spoke first, voice trembling. "We should pack our things." Her daughter shook her head violently. "No. We are not leaving. He'll change his mind once he calms down." But her father placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "We've caused enough trouble." She pulled away sharply. "Don't you dare make this my fault." My son winced at the sharpness of her tone. He picked up the recorder again, holding it loosely in his hand. "Did you mean what you said?" he asked her quietly. She didn't answer. That silence was louder than any confession. He nodded once, then set the recorder down and walked toward the front door. "I'll call the sheriff," he said. "We'll do this legally. No arguments. No yelling." Her face twisted in disbelief. "You would call the sheriff on your own wife?" My son paused near the door and turned back. "Yes," he said simply. If she violates my mother's property again, I will. Her parents didn't argue. They moved toward the hallway, gathering jackets, bags, scattered pieces of their brief and misguided comfort. She stood in the middle of the living room, trembling with anger and despair. "You're ruining everything," she hissed at me. I met her eyes calmly. "You ruined it yourself." She staggered away from me as though the words had struck her, gripping the back of the sofa for support. Her mother approached me timidly. We truly didn't know it would come to this," she whispered. "I'm sorry." There was no victory in her apology, only exhaustion. "I believe you," I said softly. "But this house, this situation, it was never yours to fix." She nodded, turning back to help her husband gather their things. My son returned to the room with his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly, "we need assistance with a trespassing situation." My daughter-in-law's jaw dropped. "You actually called? You really?" Her voice broke before she finished. He didn't look at her. Not once. When he ended the call, he sat down beside me, exhaling a long, weary breath. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I reached for his hand. "Don't apologize," I said. "You're seeing clearly now." He nodded, eyes damp but determined. Outside, a vehicle approached slowly, its tires crunching over the gravel. Her panic rose like heat from the floorboards. "You can't let them do this to me," she screamed at her parents. But they were already by the door, defeated, drained, ready to leave the home they should never have claimed. My son stood again as the soft knock echoed, different from before, official and expected. He opened the door and the sheriff stepped inside, his calm presence filling the room with a firmness that settled everything in place. Her world, built on manipulation, entitlement, and stolen security, collapsed in that moment. Not with violence, not with shouting, but with truth. And she had nowhere left to hide from it. The sheriff stepped farther into the room, his calm steps echoing across the wooden floor. He didn't raise his voice or ask unnecessary questions. He simply scanned the space with a practiced eye, reading the tension like a well-worn script. My daughter-in-law stiffened as he stopped beside her, and for the first time that day she seemed truly small, not from her posture but from the sudden absence of the authority she'd always tried to project. "I'm going to need everyone to stay calm," the sheriff said gently. "We'll handle this one step at a time." Her parents nodded immediately. He didn't. She stared at him with a mixture of anger and fear, as if she expected some miracle to swoop in and protect her. But miracles don't appear for those who build their power on lies. My son walked toward the sheriff, keeping his voice steady. "They've been staying here without permission. We need them removed from the property tonight." The sheriff glanced at me. "Ma'am, is that correct?" I nodded. "Yes. I didn't invite them here. They came without my knowledge and they've refused to leave." A quiet tremor passed through my daughter-in-law's body. "You can't do this," she whispered at my son. "You can't let them throw us out." He didn't look at her. "Not yet," the sheriff continued. "I'll need identification from all of you." He motioned toward her parents first. Her mother stepped forward and spoke softly. "We'll cooperate. We don't want any trouble." Her father followed, already reaching for his wallet with shaking hands. She remained frozen, hands balled at her sides. "Ma'am," the sheriff said to her gently, "you too." She finally moved, her motions jerky, like someone swallowed by disbelief. And as she reached into her purse, the contents shifted loudly, keys, receipts, and something else. Something metallic. A small box. She snapped the purse shut quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse. My heart tightened. I knew that box. I had given it to my son years ago. A place to store important papers. A place he had kept hidden in his study drawer. A place I never thought she'd have the audacity to take. But there was. In her purse. The sheriff didn't notice. My son didn't notice. But I did. And it was time. "Sheriff," I said calmly, "before you escort them out, I'd like to point out something." My daughter-in-law's head snapped toward me so quickly her hair whipped across her cheek. "Don't," she whispered fiercely. But I stood up, walking past the table toward her. My boots made soft thuds on the floor, each step a reminder that this house was mine. Not hers, not theirs. I pointed to her purse. "There's an item in there that doesn't belong to her." She clutched the purse against her chest. "It's mine," she hissed. Everything in here is mine. My son frowned. What is she talking about? I didn't look at him. I looked at her. Directly. Steadily. Open it, I said. No. Her voice cracked with panic. There's nothing. She's trying to embarrass me. My son stepped forward, his tone soft but firm. Let me see. She backed away. No. It's private. The sheriff watched her carefully. Ma'am, if there's something relevant to this situation, it needs to be shown. Her breathing quickened. Why are you all against me? Why are you letting her twist everything? She's doing this on purpose. My son held out his hand. Give me the purse. For a moment I thought she might refuse. But then something inside her broke. Her shoulders slumped, her fingers loosened, and she handed it over. He opened it slowly. Carefully. The small metal box glinted beneath the dim lamplight. He removed it and held it up. Where did you get this? She took a shaky step forward. I found it. In the cabinet. I thought it was. It was in my study drawer, he said quietly. Why were you snooping in there? She didn't answer. He opened the box. Inside lay 3 documents. Our family trust paper. My late husband's original property deed transfer. And the handwritten letter he'd left my son for after his passing. Her parents gasped softly behind her. My son lifted the letter with trembling hands. I knew what it said. I had helped my husband write it. A message about responsibility. About honesty. About protecting what mattered. My son read the first few lines silently, and his shoulders sagged under the weight of betrayal far deeper than forged signatures and secret loans. This was personal. Intimate. Underhanded. He looked up at her with eyes that no longer saw a partner, only a stranger. Why did you take these? He asked, his voice breaking. She swallowed hard. I just wanted to understand things. I wanted to know how much the house was worth. I wanted. How much my family was worth? He corrected. No. Her voice cracked again. You don't understand. I wanted security. I wanted. Control, I said softly. Her glare snapped toward me. You ruin everything. If you had just stayed out of this. This is my house, I said. I had every right to step into it. The sheriff stepped forward slightly, sensing tension rising. Let's keep this calm. My son closed the metal box and held it against his chest. You had no right to take these. His voice shook. You went too far. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was scared. I thought you'd leave me. I thought. You pushed me away yourself, he said, softer but heavier than ever before. She reached for him, but he stepped back. No, he whispered. We're done. The room fell silent. Her parents lowered their heads, accepting what she still refused to believe. The sheriff motioned toward the door. Let's step outside. We'll handle the removal. She shook her head wildly. No, please. Don't make me leave like this. But she had already crossed lines she could not uncross. My son opened the door. Cold mountain air rushed in, brushing against my face like a quiet reminder of how long I had waited for this peace. He turned to her one last time. You need help. Real help. But not at the cost of my mother. Or my father's memory. Or my sanity. Her sobs filled the room. Her parents gently guided her outside, their hands steady but their faces drawn with regret. The sheriff followed them down the porch steps. And then the door closed. Quiet returned to the house, soft and deep, like the mountain itself exhaling. My son stood near the window, staring into the night. Snow flurries drifted through the porch light, swirling softly in the wind. He didn't speak. He just breathed, slowly, painfully, finally free of the weight he didn't realize he'd been carrying. I walked to him, placing my hand lightly on his back. He turned to me. Mom. I'm so sorry. I shook my head. Don't be. Tonight wasn't about blame. It was about truth. He wiped his eyes. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. You see clearly now, I said gently. That's enough. We stood there for a moment, watching the snow collect along the steps where she had just been. He took a deep breath. I'm filing for divorce. I nodded. I know. And the loans. I'll fix everything. You don't have to fix it alone, I said. You have me. His shoulders finally relaxed. I should have listened sooner. We learn when we're ready, I said. Not before. We walked back to the dining table, sitting in the warm glow of the fireplace. The folder lay open still, but it no longer carried the weight it once did. The documents had done their job. The truth had spoken. He reached across the table and held my hand. "Mom, thank you for not giving up." I felt tears rise, not of pain but of release. A mother doesn't give up. She waits. She watches. And when the time comes, she stands. He smiled. A real smile, soft and sincere. Outside, the sheriff's car drove away, carrying her final excuses into the night. In the silence that followed, the house felt different. Lighter. Warmer. Mine again. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the steady, comforting certainty that I had reclaimed not just my home, but my place in my son's life. As the fire crackled and the snow continued to fall, I whispered the words I had waited years to say. This time the ending belonged to me. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't leave yet. Subscribe and join me for more dark, emotional tales of strength, betrayal, and the quiet revenge only women like us truly understand.